Hello, good morning, everyone. How are you? Okay, actually, if you give me 1 second, I just need to uh, fix a banner that I'm gonna put at the bottom of my screen. Let's see if I can do this. I can. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. Ooh, great. Oh no, that's not going to work. Is that what I want? Oh, wait. Oh. Yes, and that's good to know. Okay, so as I say at the beginning of all of my streams, there is I'm on partial shadow ban. So sometimes it's hard to find my videos and you can never find the first three. So if you go to vincentbrunoshadowban.blogspot.com, it's at the bottom of the screen and it is also in the description. You can find all of my videos. Also, if you want to find the papers that I'm reading, the books that I've read, the videos that I'm showing, except for these ones, Mormonism by Billy Crone. I don't have these up on the website, but I do have a website with all the material on it. It's called bewisestserpents.blogspot.com. It is in the description box and it is at the bottom of the screen. So if you just give me a second, I just need to find this. Hold on. Find this video so I can put it on my blog and share it. Hold on 1 second. My streams always take about a minute to start, about 3-4 minutes to actually get into what I want to say because I have to get some things done right in the beginning. Like I said, sharing the link. One of the reasons that I need to share the link is that I lost all my subscribers because I lost my channel. You give me a second, I'm almost done. Yeah, I lost all my subscribers. I don't know what I said, but I'm sure it wasn't that bad. And I haven't been taken down yet, even though people have been reporting my videos, at least some of them. It's two people reported my videos for like harassment because I was like talking shit about them, which thank God it's not that bad that they're taking it down just because you're talking shit about people. Okay. And hold on 1 second. Let me just share this on Facebook. Hold on. Let me just share it on Facebook. And then we can start. Okay. So we have been reading. The title of the paper that we're reading is American Proto-Zionism and the Book of Lehi, Recontextualizing the Rise of Mormonism by Don Bradley at Utah State University. Again, you can get this paper on thewisestserpents.blogspot.com at the bottom of the screen and in the description box. Okay, what have we been talking about so far? It's just so it's so interesting. I find this to be absolutely fascinating. So there was this book of Lehi that Joseph Smith wrote that got stolen. This, doesn't seem to be one of his myths where, he said, "Oh, the golden plates disappeared after the angel Moroni gave them to me." That's not what I mean. This was a paper or a book Joseph Smith really wrote, and it got stolen by someone. I don't know. I forget how, but it got stolen. And the book was never rewritten. But the book was called the Book of Lehi, and we do know a little bit of stuff about it. But it was basically the Book of Mormon was a lot more Christian, New Testament focused, whereas the Book of Lehi, original Mormonism, was more Judaic and Old Testament focused. So at that time, what was going on, there was two kinds of proto-Zionism going on in America, and there was Christian Zionism, uh, and there was Jewish Zionism. So Christian Zionism was concerned with bringing in um, Jews, but converting them and putting them in a space here in America to help them flee persecution in Eastern Europe. Whereas the Jewish Zionists wanted to create a colony for Jews in America from Eastern Europe and other places that could be a temporary uh, launch pad, a temporary place to stay, and a launch pad into recolonizing Israel. So, um, it would seem that Joseph Smith was more of the Jewish mind of not converting the Jews and sending them over to Israel. And I've shown before that Mormons are quite Zionist. Um, Joseph Smith sent people over to Israel and stuff like that. I don't know what their modern doctrines are, but you know, we'll see. Anyway, let me continue. So we are at the narrative of Mosiah, the finding of the interpreters. Among the lost stories we can restore to Book of Mormon narrative is one that scholars have known was missing, but lack detail of how did the Nephites acquire the scrying tool called the interpreters, which had originally been in the possession of another Book of Mormon people, the Jaredites. The interpreters originate in the extant story of the Jaredite co-founder known as the brother of Jared and are presumably passed down with his seal plates to the last surviving Jaredite prophet, either Ether. Centuries later, they simply appeared in the extant Nephite narrative without explanation of how they passed into Nephite hands. In an essay titled Unanswered Questions in the Book of Mormon, John A. Tvednes classes his transfer of interpreters among the question of the Book of Mormon raises but does not answer. For similar reasons, the late Sidney B. Sperry labeled it one of the Book of Mormon's problems. Wrote Sperry, now the interesting question arises, how and when did the Urim and Thummim, the interpreters, leave the hand of the Jaredite people and get in the hands of the Nephite prophets? Tvednes and Sperry offer multiple hypothetical answers to this question, including in both cases the idea that the Nephites found or were led to the interpreters after the Jaredites lost or buried them. More recently, Valentin Arts has engaged with this puzzle, positing the same as I will argue below, that Mosiah was the first Nephite to acquire the interpreters. Arts wonders how he came to possess the interpreters and the brother of Jared's plate with which they were said to be sealed up. How did the elder Messiah obtain the sealed record and interpreters? That the Book of Mormon would leave this question open is uncharacteristic. The book seems obsessed with explaining the provenance of various relics. Using the information given within the extant text, it is possible to trace every link in the province of Nephi's small plates across an entire millennium, separating him from his distant descendant Moroni. The extant text similarly tracks the transmission of the large plates, other than omitting names for the individual kings who possessed the plates during the lost manuscript period, omissions that were probably not made in the fuller text. Given the Book of Mormon is generally so careful in tracing the transmission of relics even from one individual to another, it is startling that it fails to trace that transmission of the interpreters from one nation to another. Where is the narrative describing how the interpreters got from the Jaredites to the Nephites? An answer is suggested by the timing of interpreters' first appearance among the Nephites. As further detailed below, the first indication that the Nephites had acquired the Jaredite interpreters appears in the extant condensed narrative of Messiah, whose fuller story was contained in the lost manuscript. In the interpreters first, if the interpreters first came into Nephite hands during the periods covered in detail in the lost manuscript, this accounts for the event's absence from the extant text. The missing story is in the missing manuscript. As Valentin Arts wrote, if such an important event occurred, why was it not explicitly recorded in the Book of Mormon? To that question, we do have a definitive answer. Maybe there was information on the topic in the 116 pages that were lost by Martin Harris. That's the Book of Lehi that was lost. Fayette Lapalm's Joseph Smith Sr. account of interpreters. Fortunately, survivals from the missing story appear in familiar sources. Fayette Lapalm's interview with Joseph Smith Sr. Lapalm's interview report offers an account of the Nephite acquisition of the interpreters. As mentioned in Chapter 1, Mark Ashurst McGee has raised the possibility that this narrative from Lapalm originally appeared in the Book of Lehi. I will argue an extensive case for this hypothesis, and going further will attempt to place Lapalm's narrative geographically, biographically, and chronologically within the world of the Book of Mormon, identifying where the interpreters were found, by whom, and by what point, and at what relative to what extant narrative. Lastly, I will build on this work of placing Lapalm's narrative in its Book of Mormon context to further argue that Lapalm's narrative of the interpreters fits into the larger Book of Mormon narrative about the interpreters and also coheres with and illuminates Joseph Smith's practices as a scryer. The upshot of all this will be that Fayette Lapalm's narrative of the interpreters fits the Book of Mormon too well to not be a narrative from the initial Book of Mormon manuscript, a lost Book of Lehi narrative. In the arguments below, the skeptical reader may especially question how well the Lapalm narrative can be placed, perhaps particularly in geographical location within the Nephite world. The data provided by the extant Book of Mormon text is in some place quite thin, and the strength of the arguments I can make from the data are necessarily bounded by the limitation of the data itself. In seeking to place Lapalm's narrative in the Book of Mormon context, I am looking for the best fit among the data, the working model in which the data connect most intricately and coherently, and that best account for all the available data. The inference from the data made below vary in certainty and strength. Some of the inferences made below are very strong on their own, and I will argue that the overall case authenticating Lapalm's narrative is quite strong. Nonetheless, even where the data is thinnest, as it is for identifying the hill north of Shiloh as the geographical setting of Lapalm's interpreter's narrative, I can offer an analysis of the available data and a coherent model to serve as a springboard for future scholarship on the subject. Smith Lapalm's narrative and the Book of Mormon's unanswered questions. That Fayette Lapalm, who likely never read the Book of Mormon, could offer answers to questions that arise only upon closer reading of the text gives evidence that he did, as he claimed, have inside information about the Book of Mormon's contents from Joseph Smith Sr., and that these contents were from the book's lost manuscript. That Joseph Smith Sr. would have told Lapalm a narrative of the acquisition of the interpreters from the lost manuscript is highly plausible. As noted earlier, the elder Smith's recounting of the Book of Mormon narrative to Lapalm and Ramsdell was front heavy, emphasizing the early lost manuscript period, presumably because this was precisely the part of the narrative Lapalm and Romsdale would not be able to read later in the published work. As a treasure digger, Joseph Smith Sr. also had a special interest in scrying and hence would have naturally homed in on narratives about a scrying instrument like the interpreters. Since Smith Sr. had already related to Lapalm the story of the role of the interpreters or spectacles in the coming forth of the Book of Mormon, he would have had all the more reason to tell him the interpreter's backstory from within the book's actual narrative. Lapalm's account of the Nephite acquisition of the interpreters is as follows. During the travels of the American Israelites in their promised land, Lapalm recounts they found something of which they did not know the use, but when they went into the tabernacle, a voice said, "You have what have you got in your hand there?" They replied that they did not know, but had come to inquire. When the voice said, "Put it on your face and put your face in a skin, and you will see what it is." They said so. They did so and would see everything of the past, present, and future, and it was the same spectacle that Joseph found within the gold plates. The gold bowl stopped here and ceased to direct them any further. Hold on one second. Hold on. Just take a Lapalm's report thus offers an answer to a question about the interpreters raised by the extant Book of Mormon text, but left unanswered by that text. Notably, Lapalm's very brief account also answers a second question raised but left unanswered by the extant Book of Mormon text, one about the bull or Liahona. Namely, why is Liahona, which is used to guide travels during the lost manuscript period, not used during later journeys and wars of Nephites detailed in the extant text, even though it has handed down among the Nephites with the plates? Despite Fayette Lapalm's evident lack of familiarity with the Book of Mormon's details, in one brief narrative from Joseph Smith Sr., he offers answers to both these questions. His narrative describes how the Nephites acquired the interpreters. They found them having been led to them by the Leona, and it offers a reason why the Leona was not used in the extensive wars and journeys of the extant Book of Mormon, despite these relics being re, retained. Retained and handed down among the Nephite kings and high priests, having led the Nephites to the interpreters, which are presented as a superior instrument. The Leona stopped working. But ability of Lapalm's narrative to provide plausible answers to these questions raised by but left unanswered in the extant Book of Mormon text is remarkable and tends strongly to confirm the genuineness of his narrative as based on one originally found in the Book of Mormon. Is there a plausible narrative context for Lapalm's account of the finding of the interpreters? Posting that Joseph Smith Sr. Positing that Joseph Smith Sr. Fayette Lapalm account posing that the Joseph Smith Sr. Fayette Lapalm account of the acquisition of the interpreters and the obsolescence of the Leona was originally found in the Book of Lehi manuscript. Can we plausibly place where in the lost narrative the event would have occurred? Indeed, we can. The most likely candidate for the finder of the interpreter is Smith Lapalm narrative is Mosiah, and probable context for the finding is his exodus from the land of Nephi to the land of Zarahemla. Though Lapalm offers no names and refers to everyone in the account using the pronoun they, in this case, referring to a specific individual, one could carry the interpreters in his hand into the presence of God, wear them, and use them. Two lines of evidence suggest that this individual was Mosiah. First, the account offered by Lapalm, which portrays a Moses figure on an Exodus in which a tabernacle was used, is distinctive, narrowing the possible narrative context to just two. One way the finder of the interpreters in Lapalm's narrative echoes Moses is that he has a Sinai like encounter with God. God's question of him, "What have you got in your hand there?" evokes the one God asked Moses out of the burning bush on Mount Sinai regarding his rod. "What is that in thine hand?" In a second echo of the narrative of Moses and Sinai, the seer's covering of his face after an encounter with God is also part of the Exodus. When Moses comes down from Sinai after God touches the stone and writes the Ten Commandments on them with his finger, Moses' face shines, so he covers his face with a cloth. Yet a third echo of the Exodus events at Mount Sinai, the seer has the experience in a tabernacle his people have erected in imitation of the biblical tabernacle, which is represented as having first been erected at Mount Sinai. Not surprisingly, the finder of the interpreters in Lapam's narrative also echoes Moses in being on an exodus. Lapam reports that this man was traveling in the New World, led by the Leonas, like Lehi in his exodus, and that he used a tabernacle. Since a tabernacle in this context is a portable temple, the finding of the interpreters was evidently in transition between the stationary temple. Only two such gaps between temples occurred in the Book of Mormon narrative. The first when Lehi and Nephi have left Jerusalem temple behind, but Nephi has not yet built his temple in the land of Nephi. And the second was Mosiah has left Nephi's temple behind, but has not yet built his temple in the land of Zarahemla. Although the events Lapam narrates could only occur in the Lehi Nephi narrative or that of Messiah, the extant text does not describe the findings of the interpreters in either of these narratives. While this omission may seem on the surface to leave entirely open the question of which of these individuals finds the interpreter, it actually weighs in favor of one alternative. The reason is that only one of these narratives is given in enough detail in the extant text that it would be unlikely to omit the story. The narrative of Lehi and Nephi is allotted some 24 chapters in the extant small plates account. The narrative of Messiah, by contrast, is allotted even 11 verses, and Messiah is Exodus is given only 2 verses. The extant narrative of Lehi and Nephi is considerable space to devote to describing the creation, discovery, use, and presentation of relics, the sword of Laban, the brass plates, the Leona, and Nephi's golden plates. It devotes some 126 verses to these topics, several times over as such space as the extant text gives to Messiah's entire narrative. The Messiah narrative is given in the extant account in such spare detail as to make it quite believable that many of the significant events of Mosiah's exodus are entirely elided in this account, not so with the narrative of Lehi and Nephi. Had the finding of the interpreters been part of the original Lehi and Nephi narrative, we would have expected the extant small plates versions of their narratives to devote a similar amount of space to the interpreters as it does to other relics. The interpreters are one of the most significant Book of Mormon relics. They are part of the story of the book's own emergence. They parallel Moses' stone tablets in having been touched by the hand of God. The story of their origin is given in extenso later in the Book of Mormon, and their possession and use is said to be the greatest gift a human being can have without possessing God's own power. At the very least, we would expect this crucial relic to garner a mention, yet the Lehi and Nephi narrative is entirely silent on the interpreters. Indeed, no one is described in the extant small plates text as using the interpreters or doing anything that would require their use until the time of Messiah, Benjamin, and Mosiah. I guess there were two Messiahs. This idea this leads us to the second line of evidence that demonstrates Lapam's narrative pertains to Messiah. The extant text identifies Messiah's immediate successor to the throne as possessors of the interpreters and further implies that he had them as well. An argument for this has been well memorized by Valentin Arts in his work on the sealed plates and the associated interpreters. Arts comment on Ether 4:1 in which the earliest text stated that King Benjamin had kept the sealed plates from his people, but which Joseph Smith changed in 1837 to say that King Messiah had kept them back. Notes that Messiah is the name of both Benjamin's father and Benjamin's son. Okay, that's why there's if King Benjamin held if King Benjamin held the sealed report record Of the vision of the brother of Jared, he must also have possessed the interpreters. But how and when did the Nephites get possession of these Jaredite materials? The first direct reference to the interpreters comes from the days of the young King Messiah. This first direct reference to the sealed record among the Nephites is, as we have seen, in the days of King Benjamin. The first indirect reference to the interpreters among the Nephites is in Omi 120. We read that the elder Messiah translated the engraving on a large stone by the gift and power of God. To understand this expression, we notice that the title of the Book of Mormon reads, "To come forth by the gift and power of God unto the interpretation thereof." The interpretation thereof by the gift of God, the phase by the gift and power of God, thus has reference to the interpreters and the gift of translation. From this, we may conclude that Messiah the elder was already in possession of the interpreters that the Lord had entrusted to the brother of Jared, and therefore also in possession of the sealed record. This explains why Joseph Smith changed the name Benjamin in Ether 4:1 to Messiah. Apparently, not only did Messiah the younger hold both the sealed record and the interpreters, but his grandfather did too. This would mean that the original reading of Ether 4:1 was absolutely correct, but that the amended reading is more accurate because Messiah the Elder's possession of the sacred relics predated Benjamin's possession of them. Clarifying the expanding on Art's argument, we can trace the interpreters backward from Messiah, who is explicitly said to possess them, demonstrating the probability that Messiah acquired them from his father Benjamin, and that Benjamin in turn acquired them from Messiah. Messiah uses the interpreters to translate the 24 Jaredite plates found by Lemhi's people. Messiah appears to have obtained these interpreters from his father's Benjamin. In the text, Messiah simply possesses the interpreters without any narration of his finding them. Given the importance of the interpreters within the book as a whole, and particularly within Messiah's own subsequent narrative, the omission of Messiah's discovery of the interpreters would be glaring. We are surely supposed to understand instead that Benjamin bequeathed the interpreters to Messiah as an unspecified part of the transfer of royal relics made with Messiah according to the throne, acceding to the throne. Okay, let's watch Billy Crone, Mormonism. Where's that coming from? Hello? Where's that sound coming from? I don't even know where that sound's coming from. Okay. Okay.
Amen. Hey, Bobby, guess what we're in? That's right. World religions, cults, and the occult is our big study, and we are on topic number 8. Dun, 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 dun. And it rhymes with Mormonism is what we are on tonight. And by way of recap, as you turn into your workbook, and yes, I'm not joking, believe it or not, we are going to be in the workbook tonight. Yeah, I know, it's very exciting. And we might even fill in one blank. Double wow, double wow. Okay, but as you turn there, we already saw by way of recap, the whole thing with Mormonism is it's not built on the truth. It's certainly not built on the absolute truth of God's word. It's built on a ripoff of James 1:5. It's not even a proper application of that verse, but there's a burning in the bosom. That's how they know it's true. They got something, the bad piece of chicken. I don't know what was wrong, but that's not how you relegate and determine what something is true. And which account, Mr. Joseph Smith? Which version? Young, old, different ages, different people, different times, different what? Okay, none of that is even consistent. The writings even disagree with each other, but they're supposed to be even better than what you and I have. I don't think so. It doesn't agree. No archaeological evidence. I mean, zero, zippo facto, coinage, people, battles, equipment, all that stuff. Nothing, not even a scrap can be found anywhere, and yet it's supposed to be throughout North America. Then we saw, of course, what does Mormon actually mean? It means she-monster, devil's gate, and things of that nature. And, of course, with the Eastern folks, it's even worse. That's why they don't want to use that word. But they're also extremely racist, we saw. And believe it or not, that hasn't really gone away that much, even in recent times, and we dealt with that in great detail. Then we take a look at the occult ties, okay? Because it's not just Mormonism and the occult behavior of Joseph Smith. Okay, and so we began to take a look at it. Was, number one, Joseph Smith a martyr? As they would say, he's like a lamb led to the slaughter, and he was just trying to get the... No, he wasn't. He actually had a pistol and shot people and killed people. He fought back. That's not being a martyr, amongst other issues. And, oh, by the way, who shot and killed him? Mormons shot him. Okay, now, Freemasonry. We had that whole study a couple weeks ago. It's all on the similarities of Mormonism and Freemasonry, okay? So he was not only not a martyr, but he was a Freemasonry. And last time, the whole study was all about their ties to witchcraft. Whether it be in the names, whether it be the practices and things of that nature. Most people don't catch it because most people don't understand what goes on in witchcraft, let alone with Freemasonry, okay? But that's right, so far that's where we've been, and we are in that final paragraph on page 1. If you have your workbook, start to cry, and let's get cracking. Now, we may not be in there very long, but let's get cracking. But then he says, what's to say there at the very bottom? And in fact, just the last sentence of the one just above that, where it says, after Smith's murder. Let's grab that in the context there. After Smith's murder, okay, because basically all this basically is kind of a little bit of a background introduction, believe it or not. Okay, now, so he died, right? Joseph Smith died. Now what? Well, this is the trail that we're going to begin on up to today. All right, so after Smith's murder, several LDS leaders. Now, as we saw before, the Crone translation, what does LDS mean? Leave, don't stop is my translation. Get out of there and whatever, but Latter-day Saints, but whatever. But leave, don't stop. But after several LDS leaders stepped forward to take control of the church, right? Because the guy's dead. He died. He got shot by his own people. Okay, now what? Well, they continued on, right? And there was a fight over that. And the majority of Muslims followed Brigham Young to the Salt Lake Valley, right? And we're probably going to have a whole study just on him because, boy, he was just as big of a polygamist, if not more, than Joseph Smith and all kinds of other things, slavery, you name it. So that will come down the road. But what I wanted to realize is that's most of us what we think. We say, oh, so Joseph Smith died and they ended up in Utah. Well, there's much more to the story than that, okay? Because they went in a multitude of different directions, which, by the way, is hypocritical, as we'll see here in just a little bit. Joseph Smith bragged that he did what even Jesus Christ couldn't do, and that is to keep the church together. No, you getting, man, they're splintered in so many groups, it's not even funny. But let's talk about that. He died, yes. One group went to Utah, Brigham Young, but they began to splinter off, and then those began to splinter off, et cetera, okay? After the shooting, the church, Mormon church, and again, I hesitate to even use that word church because that's our term, okay? A group split off, was led by his widow, which went back to Independence, Missouri, in that Nauvoo area there. They're known as the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, right? So you throw in Christianese terms, it makes it Christian. No, it doesn't. Okay. In fact, they even changed their name. We'll get to that in just a little bit. But they claim, okay, that they are the true Mormon entity and lay claim to the legal succession of the Mormon presidency, which was bestowed upon Joseph's son, by Joseph Smith himself. And I believe it's third because there's Joseph Sr., then Joseph Smith, who we're familiar with, Book of Mormon, and then his son. So he would be number 3. The other group, of course, yes, was Brigham Young. They went to Utah, 1847. They ended up in Salt Lake, founded Salt Lake City, he had 25 wives, a bunch of wealth, and again, we're going to get to that in a little bit. But there was a ton of splinters, groups that spun off, and let's take a look at our first video clip for that tonight.
The death of Joseph Smith created a fierce competition to take his place. 4 leading candidates emerged: Sidney Rigdon, William Marks, Samuel Smith, and Brigham Young. Sidney Rigdon claimed that he had received a revelation that he was supposed to take over, but he was not well liked by the apostles. William Marks, whom Emma Smith supported, was maneuvered out of the running because he was against polygamy, and Samuel Smith, Joseph Smith's brother, was mysteriously murdered. This left Brigham Young, who was appointed head of the apostles, and later restructured the church, making himself president. But not everyone was happy with this arrangement, and the church broke into several factions. And this wasn't the first time that movements broke away from the mainline LDS church. As early as 1831, several groups had split with Joseph Smith, usually as a result of a teaching or decision that was considered unacceptable. None of those groups still remain, but the so-called Prairie Saints, who rejected the authority of Brigham Young, still exist today. Sidney Rigdon started what became the Church of Jesus Christ. This church rejects many of the revelations of Joseph Smith, including plural marriage. James Strang claimed to have been visited by angels, who made him Smith's successor. He also claimed to have translated another ancient record, found in the Hill of Promise, called the Voree Plates, reminiscent of Joseph Smith and the Golden Plates. He was able to convince many prominent Mormons to follow him, including Apostle William Smith, Joseph's brother, and Martin Harris, one of the 3 witnesses to the Golden Plates. Granville Henrik united several Mormon communities that were left without leadership after Joseph Smith's death. They eventually moved back to Missouri and purchased the Temple Lot, the site designated by Joseph Smith for the Temple of the New Jerusalem in his original Zion. But the largest group that rejected Brigham Young is the Community of Christ, formerly known as the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This group was led by Joseph Smith III and owns the original temple in Kirtland and a newer temple in Independence, Missouri. But unlike the LDS, this church does not practice temple ceremonies. This is only a sample of the more than 100 factions of Mormonism, including polygamous fundamentalist Mormons, liberal Mormons, and New Restoration Mormons. Many of these groups, including the mainline LDS Church, claim to hold the authority and priesthood of the one true restored church. But whereas Christianity uses the written word of God as the objective authority, Mormons must rely on the subjective claims of each prophet. The presence of so many splinter groups would have been important to Joseph Smith, who boasted that he had done a work that not even Jesus Christ was capable of, by keeping his church united.
Well, that didn't happen. It's yet another big lie. And did you notice there were split off groups before he even died? Okay with that? But see, this is what we've been saying throughout our study. Remember what I said? If anybody ever comes up to you and say, God told me, or I had a revelation, or knew a little bit, run. Okay? Anytime, just stick with the Bible. Since when's this? How did this get old-fashioned? What's wrong with it? Excuse me? Isn't the Bible enough for you? Why do you always have to keep going outside the Bible? Well, just like we've been seeing with all the other different religions, that's what happens. Why do they have so many different world religions, cult and occult? Because people get out of this book, right? You get out of this book, and then you're in a heap of trouble. And what do? They claim to be Christian, but they're not. Each one's a prophet. And Joseph Smith had this vision. Well, if you can have a vision, then I can have a vision. Hey, if you can have some plates, I can have some plates. The Bobby E. place. Hey, he's got a new vision. Hey, come on, right? Once you get outside the Bible, anything goes. And that's why their whole premise is built on that mindset that you can get a new word of God outside the word of God, and everything goes downhill after that. So always be careful of that. But that's what we've seen that began to have the splinter groups. But I want to focus on that last one he mentioned there, and that was the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ. Now, they changed their name to Community of Christ, okay? And the reason why I want to talk about this, and then we'll move on, is because this is the second largest group of Mormonism, okay? And again, which is hypocritical of Joseph Smith. He said that he kept it all together. No, you couldn't even keep it together when you were alive, okay, let alone after you're dead. Okay, but that group reports over 250,000 members, 60 different nations. And again, they say that they trace their roots right back to the lineage of Joseph Smith. And if you remember in our study on Islam, that's the same thing where you have the different splits in Islam. right? Because one would say, no, it's more of a pop cult leader. And they said, no, it's got to be from the lineage of Muhammad, right? And but anyway, so it's the same thing here. They say they got the direct lineage. They organized basically 30 years, April 6, 1860. And remember, it started April 6, 1830, okay, which again they say is Jesus Christ's birthday, but as we saw last time, is actually an occult day. Shocker. But anyway, it's the second largest denomination within the Mormons, okay, and it regards itself as the true embodiment, okay, because of this supposed family lineage. Now, pay attention. Now, remember, their whole one of the big giant breakoffs was they have the true family lineage from Joseph Smith. That's why he broke off. But keep that in mind. All right. But anyway, but in the 60s, but again, see, this is what happens when you got a supposed revelation and you can get some new revelation and you get outside the Bible, they start changing stuff. Okay, it's not reliable. But in the 60s, they began to proselytize outside of North America, and it, quote, forced a reassessment and a gradual evolution of their practices and beliefs. Now, stop right there. That's a mouthful, right? Now, they did it because they encountered other cultures, and they didn't like, well, that sounds strange. So instead of saying, well, that's the truth, and that's the way it is, I tell you, we got a new revelation, and we'll meet your need too. And they just basically become all things to everybody in that aspect. But notice how it says right there, they changed their beliefs and practices. You and I don't do that. You know why? Because God is the same yesterday, today, and forever, and this book never changes, right? Okay, and one of the things that they immediately changed, okay, and this was in the 60s, right, is they changed the ordination of women to the Mormon priesthood. Well, why would they do that? Because of the influx of feminism. Now, unfortunately, we see that happening in the church today. There's a bucking against the male leadership, whether it be in the home or whether it be in the church, okay? And the same thing's happening, and that's the battle. They do the same, if you will, unfortunate rationale, okay? They say, well, we got a new revelation, or we wouldn't say that today, but what they'll say is this: well, that was a cultural issue back then. Or you'll even have people in the church say this, if you can believe this: the Apostle Paul, he was kind of, against women. He was, so we could what? Okay, and but again, no, you could like it, lump it, leave it or not. God, from the get-go, in the Scripture, has always had male headship. I don't care if it's popular in the culture or not. That's the way it is. Okay, so, but again, they have this new revelation. In the 60s, they began to manipulate. So they changed their beliefs and practices. That was number one. Okay, and again, they have some of those temples back then, but they continue to change other things. And again, they believe their whole thing, and the same thing Mormonism, even today, because remember, they got caught with racism, as we dealt with, what was that, the first night? Okay, the racism. But what do? How when they get backed up against the wall, when they have a false teaching, and they're not the only ones to do this, Jehovah's Witnesses do the same thing, right? When they get caught back in the thing, right, what do they say? Oh, I have a new light. And the light told me that you just make it up as you go, right? We caught you with something wrong, and rather admit that you're wrong, you change things. But see, this is the security we have. This is the ultimate security. God never changes, and he says that it's good for all time. When you're saved forevermore. You don't have to wonder. It's not just a cultural issue. And the thing is, God's commands are all for our good. His word is for our good. It's for our life, right? There's security in that. Listen, all I got to do is just do what he says, and I'll have the best possible life this side of heaven. Okay? Not a perfect life, because we're going to be persecuted and all that stuff. I'm not saying learn to be a better you, or something like that. But we don't have to wonder. You do what God says, he'll take care of you, right? You don't have to, well, is he going to change it this week? Or should we add another New Testament, right? Is God going to change his mind? No. Okay, and that's great for security for you and I, okay? But they have this prophetic leadership, okay? And listen to what these guys, you see, you're thinking I'm joking, a New Testament? Well, this branch of Mormonism, that's actually what they do, right? Now, the Book of Mormon is actually what they would basically say is a new, whatever, revelation. Okay, but these guys keep on going. This branch of Mormonism on up to today. And they would say that the president, he acts as a prophet. And listen, what they do is somebody's out there and they get a new light. I got a light, the light's on. And here's their process, okay? He gets these so-called possible inspired documents that people come up with. And when the document goes to the floor, what they call the World Conference, and it goes to the floor for debate, okay, the president retires to a room to allow for personal consideration. And then they come out and vote on it. And if they vote on it in the positive, then that becomes sacred scripture. What? You can make up anything. You can go. And then wait a second, well, what about those guys that you put in those positions that are supposed to know the truth, but then they voted against that, but they lost, they weren't in the majority? Why should you trust them? Who goes right? What? It's crazy. And it still goes on today. Another false teaching they say that all persons have great worth. Really? Wrong Bible. All have sinned, myself included, and fall short of the glory of God. We all deserve to die and go straight to hell. Okay? And that kind of teaching is not only false, it cheapens the love and grace and mercy of Jesus Christ. What's so amazing about God's love is we were all doomed. What? While we were still sinners, Romans 5. While we were ungodly. While we were doomed. While we were God's enemies, not his best buddies and worthy. Okay? Christ died for us, man. He made a way. He didn't have to. That's why. That magnifies his love. When you say, well, God had to save me because this is so worthy. Yeah, let me go talk to your spouse. We'll fix this real quick. But that's another false teaching that they have. And of course, salvation is just like the rest of Mormonism. It's based on works as well. But they not only change their practices, they're also involved in the ecumenical interfaith movement. Right? Well, that kind of makes sense because you just keep it going and you're already adjusting your truth and belief and practices to fit everybody because you just got to get those numbers up. Okay? It's the same thing. They are a part of the National Council of Churches and the World Council of Churches. Well, it's got to be Christian because it says church. Those two entities are two of the biggest entities on the planet that is snookering so-called Christianity to go along with the one world religion. Okay? The NCC and the WCC, World Council of Churches, man, it's all about getting us together and working, of course, with the other entities. And, of course, they became a member of this, quote, ecumenical body. But then not only that, they also, again, not only adjusted for the women to become priests, a big thing, but they're also, hey, I mean, here's the latest thing that society's trying to cram down your throat, but they're also big on the LGBT participation. So apparently they got new light. Hey, guess what? Hey, I guess it's okay now. And that's what they promote. The allowing not only for same-sex couples for marriage, but also the priesthood ordination of practicing homosexuals as well. Okay? But again, see, that's the danger. When you get outside this book, there's security. Hey, it is what it is. Whether you like the headship issue or not, oh well. And trust God, he does things for our good. Okay? Whether you agree on the issue of homosexuality, whatever, oh well. I don't care how popular whatever society says. God does this for our own good. It does not change. It's not a cultural issue. But again, that's not how they base truth. That's how the cults, that's how the occult, that's how world religions, they don't base their truth. Even as we saw before with Catholics, Roman Catholicism, right? They say, oh, it's the Bible, but their Bible's not the same Bible as ours. And it's not even just that. What do they say? They say that basically, okay, it's the Bible, but our Bible, but even that, it's not, no, it's also the rulings of the Pope, the church councils, the early church fathers. So which one is it? Right? Those are the challenges that you have. People say, I believe in the Bible, it's only the Bible, but that's not what they practice. Oh, and let me just step on some toes. That's going on in the church today. We'll sit there and we'll have a doctrinal statement that this is the final rule of faith and practice, sola scriptura, right? But is that really what we practice? No. I've said this so many times. What I have at least witnessed and experienced, I don't care where I've ever pastored, this book is not determining the lives of Christians. You know what it is? The secular educational system, personal opinion, peer pressure, okay, and secular media. That's where it's coming from. And then what they do is they go in here and try to look for loopholes. Or they twist and take verses out of context because there's a societal pressure or something they just want to be true, and they try to squeeze it into the text. Okay? And that's unfortunate. So we're in danger of doing the same thing. Also, as we're going to see, Lord willing, later, with some of the charismatic fringe groups, they're doing the same thing. Because what do they teach today? Well, there's a prophet so-and-so, or you can...
Hello? Good. Okay, hold on one second. Hold on one second. Let me just find my place. Okay. We're getting there. We have to get to page 197 and we're on page 144. So let me think, if we were on page 147, we would have 50 more pages. Okay, let me read. That Benjamin. Oh, God, let me make a coffee. Sorry. Um, not everyone has followed me on this journey of explore, of Mormonism, just going down this long journey of Mormonism. Um, it's getting towards its end. I'm gonna finish off this Billy Crone stuff, and then I'm pretty much done. Hold on. Okay. Hello, let's see if you can hear me. Hello? Yeah, you can hear me. Okay, let me just get my coffee, and then we'll start. Lots of go to be wise as serpents. There's lots of information on Mormonism and Freemasonry and Zionism there. Lots of it. A lot of it. Tons of it. Okay. Okay, I have my coffee. Let's read. That Benjamin would have given Messiah the interpreters also makes sense since, as Art points out, two different passages of the Book of Mormon's earliest manuscripts identify Benjamin as having had the interpreters. The earliest version of Ether 4:1 indicates that Benjamin possessed the sealed plates with which the interpreters had been sealed up, implying that Benjamin possessed the interpreters as well. The earliest version of Mosiah 21:28 explicitly identifies Benjamin as the previously unnamed king said to have the interpreters. The Ammon's conversation with King Lami in Mosiah 8:13 Ammon identifies the interpreters as a gift from God by which the king in Zarahemla could translate. I can assuredly tell thee, O king, of a man that can translate the records, for he has wherewith that he can look and translate all records that are of the ancient date, and it is a gift from God, and the things are called interpreters. When this conversation is later referenced in the printer's manuscript of Mosiah 21:28, the earliest extant manuscript for this portion, this king is explicitly identified as Benjamin, and now Limhi was again filled with joy on learning from the mouth of Ammon that King Benjamin had a gift from God whereby he could interpret such engravings. While this identification had been questioned because of other chronological indicators that appear to have Benjamin already deceased by the time of that conversation, there's no question that the earlier manuscript of Ether 4:1, the manuscript of Ether 4:1 and Mosiah 21:28 identify Benjamin as a possessor, respectively, of the sealed plates and of their accompanying interpreters. From the authorial perspective, there does not appear to have been any doubt that Benjamin possessed both of these closely related relics. We can thus trace Nephite possessions of the interpreters to ask far back as Mosiah's son Benjamin. Can we trace it back any further? Valentin Arts accurately notes that AMI 120 implies that Mosiah used the interpreters to interpret the engravings of a Jaredite stone record by the gift and power of God. Nearly identical language is used to indicate that Messiah's successors could translate or interpret such engravings by the gift of God or a gift from God by use of the interpreters. This gift of God, the wherewithal of the translation, is the interpreters. He has wherewith that he can look and translate all records that are of ancient date, and it is a gift from God, and the things are called interpreters. Messiah is thus implicitly identified as having and using the interpreters. As Sidney B. Sperry concluded in his essay, The Problem of the History of Transmission of the Use of Urim and Thummim, these sacred interpreters were certainly in the possession of the Nephites as early as the day of Elder Messiah, who must have used them in translating engravings on a large stone which had been brought to him. Messiah is as far back as we can trace the interpreters having been in the Nephites' possession. The interpreters are not mentioned before Messiah, and no one before him is said to interpret engravings or doing anything else that would require the use of the interpreters. Messiah is thus the earliest known Nephite possessor of the interpreters. Given one, that Lapam's story of the finding of the interpreters could only refer to either Lehi, Nephi, or Messiah. Two, that if Lehi or Nephi found the interpreters, we should have the story in their extensive extant narratives. And three, that Messiah is the earliest known Nephite possessor of the interpreters. It follows that Lapam's account of the Nephite findings of the interpreters should be understood as a narrating story of Messiah. The finding of the interpreters at or by the Nephite Sinai, the hill north of the land Shalom. Shiloh. Hold on one second. The probable text of this story from the Lost Book of Mormon manuscript can be fleshed out even further. Not only can we place it in the larger narrative of Messiah's and specifically in the story of this Exodus, we can place the narrative geographically in its most probable place setting within the Book of Mormon. The hill north of the land Shiloh is, as a place in Messiah's Exodus, extant material from the Messiah narrative indicates that when Messiah led his people, the children of Nephi, on their exodus from the land of Nephi to the land of Zarahemla. They encamped at the hill north of the land of Shalom, paralleling the children of Israel's encampment at Mount Sinai during the biblical Exodus. This element of the Messiah narrative can be found in the extant Book of Mormon text in a narrative flashback to the lost manuscript. The flashback appears in the Book of Mormon text not far from the point where Joseph Smith resumed the dictation after losing the initial manuscript. After the loss of the manuscript, Joseph Smith picked up the dictation at the present opening of the Book of Mosiah. Soon after resuming the dictation in the Book of Mosiah, Joseph Smith dictated the narrative of the wicked King Noah, and it is here that our flashback occurs. The narrative reports that Noah caused a great tower to be built on the hill north of the land of Shiloh, which had been a resort for the children of Nephi at the time they fled out of the land. The story of the children of Nephi fleeing from their land to gather at the resort or place of refuge and defense at the hill north of the land Shiloh is not familiar to the readers of the Book of Mormon prior to this point, but it is apparently supposed to be. When the hill north of Shiloh is identified as the one that Nephites use as a resort that they fled out of the land, this appears to be intended to orient the reader by relating this hill back to previous reported narrative. The attempted orientation fails because whatever narrative has been given about this event is not in the extant text. Nevertheless, the attempted reminder of the Shilom's hill in a previous narrative gives a peek at that otherwise missing narrative, namely at a time when the children of Nephi fled out of the land, they used this hill as a resort. What more can we say about this missing narrative? Fortunately, the extant text gives us enough information to identify the narrative context in which this non-extant narrative occurred. Asking a few questions of the evidence will help us situate the fleeing out of the land indicating in the context of the larger narrative. First, what is the land out of which the children of Nephi are fleeing? The land referenced is almost certainly the land of Nephi. The land of Nephi is the original Nephite home where the main body of Nephites dwelt until Mosiah led them on the exodus to the land of Zarahemla. The land of Nephi is also close enough to the hill north of Shiloh that this hill had a watchtower built on it for the protection of the land of Nephi. It was thus reasonable fleeing distance for a group seeking refuge. Second, when did the children of Nephi flee out of the land? Identical language to this talk of fleeing out of the land is used in two small plates narratives that stand in for the book of Lehi originals. The narrative of Lehi's exodus from Jerusalem and the narrative of Mosiah's exodus from the land of Nephi. Lehi's exodus from Jerusalem cannot be the event referenced. Those who flee are described as the children of Nephi, and when they flee, they take refuge at the hill north of Shiloh. At a time of Lehi's exodus, Nephi has no children, and the hill north of Shiloh in the land of Nephi are on the other side of the ocean from Lehi's fleeing band. Messiah's exodus, on the other hand, can be the event referenced. Messiah, per the extant summary of his narrative, was warned of the Lord that he should flee out of the land of Nephi, and as many as would hearken unto the voice of the Lord should also depart out of the land with him into the wilderness. Messiah led the Nephites or children of Nephi on an exodus from the land of Nephi and would have needed to lead them on only on a 3 days journey for them to arrive at their resort at the hill north of Shiloh. Third, why are those who flee referred to as the children of Nephi? Once we have observed how similar language about fleeing out of the land is used in the extant Book of Mormon narratives of Messiah, we find this children of Nephi phrasing readily explained as an allusion to Messiah's exodus. The phrase children of Nephi is patterned on the phrase children of Israel, used of the Israelites hundreds of times in the Hebrew Bible. Yet despite the phrase's frequent use in a generic term for the Israelites in the Bible, it is mostly not used this way in the Book of Mormon. It is used instead in a very particular context. I mean, none of this obviously never happened. We're supposed to believe that there's, like, he was getting into it, all this architecture and temples and elephants and horses, and this is all supposed to be here. The Book of Mormon uses the phrase children of Israel as a generic term for the Israelites twice, both times in the same passage. The remaining 6 times the term is used in the Book of Mormon, it refers specifically to the Israelites at the time of the Exodus. It is used to describe the Israelites at various stages of the Exodus, their captivity immediately preceding the Exodus, the flight from Egypt and parting of the Red Sea, the smiting of the rock, the provocation of the wilderness, and giving of the law. Given that the Book of Mormon uses the phrase children of Israel primarily to evoke the biblical Exodus, the parallel use in Mosiah 11:13 of the children of Nephi fleeing out of the land is likely meant to evoke the Exodus of Mosiah. Notably, the phrase children of Nephi is itself used elsewhere in the Book of Mormon 4 times. In 2 of these cases, it serves as a generic reference to Nephites. In one, it identifies non-Nephites as adopting a Nephite identity, and in the fourth, it refers to Messiah's people as the end of their exodus. While the reference to the children of Nephi in Mosiah 11:13 could just be a rare generic reference to Nephites, the context of their fleeing out of the land suggests that here, as Mosiah 25:2, Messiah's exodus is being evoked. Fourth, what does the location of the hill used in the children of Nephi's resort tell us about the event when they fled out of the land? One thing the extant narrative of the Book of Mormon tells us about the land Shiloh and its northern hill is that they were en route between the land of Nephi and the land of Zarahemla, and this again points to the events in question being the exodus of Messiah. Twice in the extant narrative, when a group is traveling between the land of Nephi and the land Zarahemla, Shiloh is mentioned, and in one of these instances, its north side hill is noted. First, the land Shiloh and this hill are acknowledged as part of the journey of Ammon. Ammon's camp at this hill, which was north of the land of Shiloh, as part of a journey from the land of Zarahemla back to the land of Nephi that retraces the exodus of Messiah in reverse. Ammon's journey is a narrative inverse of that of Mosiah. In Mosiah's journey, a future king who is descendant of Nephi leads an exodus from the land of Nephi to the land of Zarahemla. In Ammon's journey, a descendant of the abdicated king Zarahemla leads an expedition from the land of Zarahemla to the land of Nephi. In the second such journey where Shiloh is mentioned, Ammon group and Limi's people flee from their Lamanite oppressors, this time traveling like Mosiah the Nephi to Zarahemla. They went around about the land of Shiloh in the wilderness and bent their courses towards the land of Zarahemla. What these two journeys narratives tell us is that the course between the land of Nephi and Zarahemla winds around the edges of the land of Shiloh, with the hill north of Shiloh serving as a way station along the path. Given the positions of the land Shiloh and its north side hill between the land of Nephi and Zarahemla, we know of one Nephite journey narrated in the lost manuscript that would make skirted the land of Shiloh and pass by its north side hill, the exodus of Mosiah. Since Mosiah 11:13 refers to the children of Nephi fleeing from the land of Nephi and traveling by the hill north of Shiloh on the course between Nephi and Zarahemla, and we are supposed to already know this narrative from the lost manuscript, the parsimonious reading is that this text and Omi 1:12 refers to the same series of events, a flight from the Nephi after which Messiah camped his people at the hill north of Shiloh on the way to Zarahemla. Sinai and Shiloh, the hill north of Shiloh, as the site of Messiah's tabernacle and dialogue with God about the interpreters. Granting that the hill north of the land Shiloh served as a resort for the Nephites on their Messiah exodus, what more may be inferred about this hill? I hypothesize that it is here that Messiah erects his tabernacle and brings the interpreters into the presence of God as described in Joseph Smith Sr.'s narrative to Faya Lapam. The hill north of Shiloh is connected with the Lapam's tabernacle narrative via the hill's echoes of two biblical sacred high places, Sinai and Shiloh. The Shiloh hill's name echo of the biblical Shiloh suggests a possible connection between that hill and Joseph Smith Sr.'s narrative of the interpreters and the Nephite tabernacle. The echoes of the biblical Sinai in both the narrative of the Shiloh hill and Smith Sr.'s tabernacle narrative also serve to further link this hill with his narrative. The first intimation of the Shiloh's hill The first intimation of Shiloh Hill's possible connection with Joseph Smith Sr.'s narrative of the interpreters and the Nephite tabernacle is the name Shiloh. The biblical high place Shiloh served for 3 centuries as home to the tabernacle and hence also to the ark, the high priest, and the high priestly relics like the Urim and Thummim. The echo of the biblical Shiloh in the Book of Mormon toponyms, Shiloh fits with the hill identified as adjoining Shiloh being the place where Messiah found his Urim and Thummim, the interpreters, and began using them in his tabernacle. The occurrence of that Messiah narrative or by this location could thus explain why the name Shiloh is assigned to this location. If the echo of the biblical Shiloh in the name Shiloh suggests the possibility that Shiloh Hill was where Messiah brought the newly found interpreters into his tabernacle, connections of both locations to the biblical Sinai strengthen this possibility. Recall that the story of the interpreters in Lapam's Joseph Smith Sr.'s interview not only echoes the Exodus in general, but also repeatedly echoes specific Exodus events occurring at Mount Sinai. At the location where the seer, whom we have identified as the Moses figure and Exodus leader, Messiah, brings the interpreters, 1, he has erected a tabernacle in imitation of the biblical tabernacle, which was first erected at Mount Sinai. 2, both ask him what is in his hand, as God asked Moses out of Sinai's burning bush. And 3, he covers his face after his encounter with God. In other words, Messiah's Sinai event, his equivalent to various Sinai incidents of Moses' Exodus, occur at the place he pitches his tabernacle in the Lapam narrative. This is his Sinai. And just what is the place that serves as Messiah's Sinai? The Shiloh Hill presents itself as an obvious candidate. The hill is the one landmark or place of encampment between the children of Nephi's exodus place and the departure of their destination, whose role in their exodus is significant enough to garner mention in the available text. As a known high place and resort on Messiah's exodus, the Shiloh Hill parallels the original Mount Sinai of Moses' exodus. His hill north of the land of Shiloh is our best candidate for Messiah's Sinai, where the events narrated by Joseph Smith Sr. to Fayette Lapalm were set. Okay.
Prophets is so important. And they have this ability to have this word or God give them. It's the same thing. How is that any different than what is going on with Mormonism today? The same thing. You're getting outside the scripture. Okay, so that's that group, and that's the second largest group that's in there. And oh, by the way, now remember I said that. Remember what was the big reason why they split off in the first place? Because they made the claim that they have the direct lineage of the founder Joseph Smith. Near. That's right, guy. That's that time for that noise. No, you didn't even get that one right. They've changed that too, right? And the key word there is just evolving, whatever. And this president, Grant McMurray, he's been designated prophet president, right, of the organization. He was the first church president who was not a direct descendant of Joseph Smith, which they considered to be a distinguishing trait from other denominations in this movement. So even the very core thing, why you even split off in the first place, you're not even doing. But again, that's the danger. You have no security. Anything goes. Once you get outside the scripture and you say you get something new, whatever, you can make anything true, right? And it's bound to fall apart every single time. And that's what's happened to them. All right, back to the workbook. Final paragraph. Woohoo! Yeah, Bobby, you ready? It ain't gonna be very long, but I'm just excited about it. Anyway, the Mormon church, right? The Mormon church is organized so that what? One prophet leads the church, okay? One prophet leads the church. Now, beneath the prophet in authority is what's called the Council of 12 Apostles. I'm giving you leadership structure. I'll get into that more in just a second. Third group is what's called the first and second councils of the 70, okay? And all these men together are called the general authorities, right? And the local churches are called wards or stake centers, and they meet for worship in what they call meeting houses, okay? So let's take a look at their structure, right? So they basically start off with what's called the first presidency, and there's two councils, but each one is addressed as the president. So these are the tops, right? There's this first president guy, two other entities, but they all get to be presidents. So I don't know if they got an issue against vice presidency, but they never use it. But anyway, we'll get to that in a second. Then below those three guys, okay, those three entities, what's called the quorum of the 12 apostles. That's got to be biblical because it's 12, just like the apostles in the Bible. So, it just makes it sound good, right? And that's made up of a senior apostle, okay, and he's addressed as president. The other 11, they're just addressed as elder. All right. So again, there's no vice presidents anywhere. I don't know if that would start a faction, or, if it starts, we just call everybody president. I don't know. But then below that, okay, so you got the first president, two counselors, everybody's a president. Then you got these 12 entities. Only the top guys are president, the rest of them are elders. Then below that is what's called the quorum of the 70. Okay, and that's made up of 7 presidents. Then you have what's called the first quorum and the second quorum. Okay, so you got any more presidents, right? Then below that is what's called the stake presidency. Okay, and then below that you got the wards. Okay, and the wards are headed up by these guys called the bishops, right? You're probably familiar with that. Okay, but that's how they kind of break it down into that. Then you come into the members, the individual members. So they're at the very, 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 very bottom, and they're not called presidents. Okay, unfortunately. But anyway, so then, well, how many? Well, some reports just take your pick. Some say 14 million, some say 15 million. And but what I found was very interesting, as we saw with the history of Joseph Smith, even last time with the witchcraft issue, because his whole family, not just him, it was a family business. Okay, they were into that money digging thing, and money digging. Well, that sounds innocuous. No, money digging was a witchcraft issue. You use witchcraft to supposedly find these hidden treasures that are guarded by spirits. It's all witchcraft. But most people don't know that. So, but anyway, they're into witchcraft. But he's into money digging. And it's not just the cardboard plates. No, it's the golden plates and all this stuff. And they're big on cash and money and this and givey. And you better give up what you're supposed to be giving, or you ain't making it into the temple and all that stuff. And we'll pull your records. And we'll get into that, Lord willing, maybe next time. Okay, but it's all about money. He was about money, amongst other things. He was also into polygamy, lust, sexual morality, whatever you want to call it, adultery, and we'll get into that later. But money, big money. So if you want to understand, also if you notice where the strategic places where typically they plant themselves. Have you ever noticed that dynamic? You're rarely ever going to find a Mormon temple in a really bad area, right? Why? Can I be blunt with you? Not a lot of money. You're going to be more in your high-end neighborhoods, new suburbia developments. Here comes a Mormon temple or a meeting house, whatever, okay, because that's where the money's at. Now, listen to how much cash is coming in, right? And you and I, we're cheerful givers. 2 Corinthians 8:9 says we give cheerfully, not under compulsion, not because we have to, because we want to, right? But theirs is, you have to. And if you want to make it to that top kingdom, the celestial kingdom out of 3, we'll get to that in a little bit, okay, then you better pay up. And if you haven't been doing it, we're going to pull your records, and you better pay up, or you're not even going to get there. So it's really extortion. But again, when you understand the history of the person, the founder, it just bleeds through the whole organization. But they make, and I just did this stat yesterday, looked online, their financial income is in excess of, listen to this, $22 million per day. Per day. Right? Okay? And their net worth is, it's hard to even get a number. It's in the billions, way big time billions. And that's just, it's hard to even number because they don't always report and stuff. And as we saw in the opening video, they're always buying and selling stuff. And so it's like, you don't really know how much they got. But they're raking in right now $22 million a day. But don't worry, I'm sure they're using that money for good things. Yeah, watch this one. Here's our next video.
As evident from their TV ads, websites, and visitor centers, Mormonism puts a lot of effort into PR and marketing. But several things about their image seem to generate a little confusion. Take Mormon art, for example. Why is Smith shown translating the golden plates like this when he actually translated them with his face in a hat? Why does this painting from the Book of Mormon, showing Jesus visiting the Nephites, feature a Mayan temple in the background, forcing an archaeological connection where none exists? Mormons are well known for following the Word of Wisdom, a list of do's and don'ts about food and drugs. It says it is not by command, but it became mandatory in 1834 for church leaders, even though many leaders, including Joseph Smith, didn't completely follow it. And in 1921, it became mandatory for entering the temple. The Word of Wisdom simply forbids hot drinks, but the church teaches that iced tea is forbidden and hot chocolate is not. It also allows mild drinks made from barley, but the church says no alcohol. And the statement to only eat meat in winter doesn't seem to be enforced at all. Mormons like to emphasize that ye shall know them by their fruits, a phrase they take to mean that their church is true because of their good works. And according to their official website, the church has given $1 billion in humanitarian aid since 1985. But according to estimated church finances, that reflects only about 1% of the church's tithing income for that time period. Interestingly, the church is currently spending $3 billion on a shopping mall in downtown Salt Lake.
How's that noise go again, guy? Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, excuse me. 1%. 1%. You're raking in a high amount of percentage, and we'll get into that Lord will next time. And you're only giving back 1%. Oh, and by the way, you're spending 3 times that much on a shopping mall for yourself. Absolutely Oh, wow. Total hypocrisy, all right? But hey, let's get back to that workbook for a little bit. That's right. Meeting houses, where we left off. They're meeting these meeting houses things. Now, the temples are not for worship, okay? That's your first and only blank tonight. But hey, at least we got one, right, Pastor Tom? That's right. They are not for worship, but they're used for ceremonies for the living and the what? Dead. Now, hey, folks, I've had the privilege to pastor in California and New York. Praise God, and having a great time getting to pastor here in Las Vegas. Get to speak at different places, around the world and stuff. And I'll be honest with you, it's been tempted. Sometimes I'm thinking, man, are these people dead? Okay, but no, I know they're alive. Okay, but but are you serious? You baptize the living and the dead. What's that all about? All right, less than 10% of LDS members are allowed to enter these structures. Okay, and this is what goes on there, amongst other things. Okay, and the temples are required for Mormon marriages, for proxies, baptisms of ancestors. Okay, so what's going on with this big old practice? They baptize for the dead. Now, they don't take corpses in there and baptize dead people. That'd be really bad. Okay, but what is all that about? So let's talk about that tonight. Baptism for the dead is a non-biblical practice. I mean, you guys realize that. Okay, it's not that I wouldn't want to do that. Right? I have enough challenges being a vertically challenged guy trying to baptize live people, right? And some of you guys, it's so funny because I see some of the guys are, a little bit bigger. A lot of people are a lot bigger than me, being small. But I love seeing the look on your guys' face when that person that's like 6'5", 275 pounds, because you think I'm going down, right? Just got to practice. But I digress. Let's move on. Baptism for the dead is a non-biblical practice where a living person, listen, is baptized in lieu of a person that passed away, and as a means of making a public profession of faith for a person that is already dead. Now, if we're not going to accept infant baptism as a means to get somebody to heaven, which is not, because again, how can an infant know what he's doing? Right? They're babies. They're not cognizant. How can they choose to accept or reject Jesus Christ? They don't know anything. So all they're doing is getting wet. Right? And that's why as Protestants, we would reject that teaching. Right? Now, I don't know what that magical age is, whatever the theological term is, the age of accountability. I don't know what that is. Kids are all different. So I don't think you can slap, it's 6, right? I don't know what it is. Okay, but certainly not as an infant. And so we reject that. But last time I checked, infants are alive. So if we're going to reject that, I'm sorry. How many guys can concur tonight? You guys look very discerning. Concur tonight that dead people make no professions, right? And if they do, run. Okay, does that freak you out? But it's not. They don't. Dead people. That'd be a good t-shirt, Bobby. Dead people do nothing. Okay, they don't do anything. Get me right? So how can they make a profession of faith and whatever? And then why would you set up this weird ritual that you could do it for a dead person? And but they're dead. You can't change. When a person dies, you're either in heaven, you're in hell. You can't change it. You can't reverse it. Oh, but isn't that popular today? People try to soften the harshness of hell. And they come up with false teachings like universalism. Or they say, well, people will have a second chance when they get to hell. Because that's just too harsh, man. No, that's the importance of get saved now. And being responsible for that. Well, Mormons basically have come up with that false teaching of baptism for dead because that's their way to soften that reality. Like, okay, because they'll at least have a chance. It's a false teaching. Let them get that. Now, what's interesting in the research, you go like, well, why, of all things for them to do? They've already done a bunch of weird things. And they ripped a bunch already off of Freemasonry and witchcraft, okay, amongst other even secular sources. And he's just hodgepodging the whole thing together. A brilliant, if you want to use this word, a brilliant plagiarist, okay? But of all things, why did you do baptism of dead? Well, I think there was a family tie, and that has to do with his brother. He had a brother named Alvin Smith. Okay, he died. He died before Mormonism took off. Now, let me trace that trail for you. He was the eldest brother of Joseph Smith. He died when he was 25, and his death occurred 2 months after Joseph's first visit to the hill from which he said to have recovered the golden plates that would later become the supposed source of the Book of Mormon. But again, who knows which account, whatever. But anyway, so that's how it goes. So basically, this guy, his brother, older brother, Alvin, died before Mormonism started. So now, this was interesting. Alvin's funeral at that time was held at the Presbyterian Church because he died before Mormonism started, right? And this is the account written by his other brother, William, Smith, and he said this about the pastor who preached Alvin Smith's funeral. He said, quote, Reverend Stockton had preached my brother's funeral sermon and made it very strongly clear that he had gone to hell. Listen, which William then cites, this is the reason that Joseph Sr. would not join the Presbyterians. So basically, he got ticked off, right? And of course, this spreads to his other son, Joseph Smith. So he got mad at the fact that, hey, guess what? There is a hell. Wow. So you can start to see an ulterior motive start to be built here in the family dynamic, okay? Now, Smith, obviously, he comes up with this doctrine of the redemption of the dead and the practice of the baptism of the dead. And January 21st, 1836, after the completion of the Kirtland Temple, Joseph Smith, here we go, claimed to have a vision. He just keeps having them, so I don't know what's up with this. Have a vision of the celestial kingdom. You remember the top tier. If you guys remember, there was the top tier. We'll see this in a little bit, hopefully. Three-tiered system that they have. And the first one, of course, is the celestial. Then you got the terrestrial. And then he's got the telestial. Now, as we've noticed that also, that's nothing new. Remember we saw last time? He ripped that off from the New Ager guy, Emanuel Swedenborg. Okay? And it's also in the Jewish Kabbalah, the occult mysticism stuff. And all he did was change this last one. That's it. But this whole three-tiered kingdom thing, nothing new. He ripped that off too. We saw that last time. So anyway, so he has this vision supposedly taking place in this top one, the celestial kingdom there. And he states that he saw his brother, guess who there? Alvin, right? And he was surprised in his presence since he died before the establishment of the Mormons, right? And the associated doctrines. So Joseph Smith stated that he then received a revelation concerning those who die, like his brother, without hearing their gospel, and the ability to receive the same opportunities as those who had the opportunity to hear it on earth, right? Well, that's convenient. Get your brother in there, right? Well, if you die, don't worry, we'll still get you in there, right? Excuse me. But also what we're going to see even today, Mormons will use this to so-called answer the skeptical question that we even get answered. And that skeptical question is, what about that guy? What about that guy in the desert island who never heard of Jesus? You mean to tell me God's going to send him to hell? Well, Mormons say, oh, yeah, that would be horrible. That's why we baptize dead people. Give him another chance. Seriously, that's really their rationale amongst that, even today. But as you and I have been equipped many times in our discipleship studies, 101 and 102, that's the importance of reading the Bible. Okay, Romans 1 and 2 gives us the answer to answer that so-called skeptical question. And that's what's called the 3 C's, right? 1, 2, and 3. The first C, nobody's going to stand before God. Hey, God, that's not right. You shouldn't have sent me to hell. I was the guy in the desert island. I didn't have a copy of the Bible. Excuse me? You have no excuse. Romans chapter 1, you have the light of creation. The light of creation. You go outside, you see a bird, a flea to a bee, you see intelligent design, which implies a designer. You look at the stars, the complexity, everything. There's no stinking way this has much chance. Okay, it drives you to what? To know that there is a God. That's what Romans 1 says, that God shows us that even though his invisible qualities, his eternal nature is seen by what has been made, creation. So you look outside and guess what? You go, wow, there's a God. You're accountable. So there's no excuse. Oh, and then not there, he gives us the second one, Romans chapter 2, and that's the light of conscience, right? And that's where Paul goes, hey, listen, even the Gentiles, okay, they don't have the copy of the law, the Jewish law, right? Yet, he says what? They know inherently, it's the moral argument. They know inherently, okay, they do the law. They know it's wrong to murder. Where did that come from? First of all, if evolution is true, how do you even decide what's right and wrong? You don't. And that's where you go, the strongest, the fittest survive. That's what Hitler relied upon. Okay, but they don't know. So where'd they get? They never saw the Jewish Torah. They didn't have a copy of that. So how do these Gentiles, Paul is saying, that they know it's inherently wrong? It's wrong to murder. Where'd that come from? Everybody knows that. Now, again, over time, your conscience can become seared. But early on, you know that's a wrong thing to do. People know inherently it's wrong to steal. Where'd that come from? Well, these are the 10 Commandments, right? But they've never seen the 10 Commandments. Where'd that come from? Well, that's the argument, the moral argument of existence. More universal moral laws logically must come from a universal moral lawgiver, i.e. God. So the fact that people know inherently morally tells us that there has to be a moral lawgiver, there has to be a God. So that's your second thing. So again, you have no excuse, right? Because they say, well, what about that guy that was blind? He never got to see creation. Well, he had a conscience. God pulls the rug out and all the skeptical things. No, so you're accountable, right? But I always like when people ask that, you don't need to compromise like the Mormons, okay, and others, okay, and you don't need to apologize for God, okay? But the other one is you flip it around and you say, okay, well, that's the theoretical, hypothetical, straw man argument, the guy on the desert island, or the guy on the mountaintop, or the guy who got lost in aisle 13 of Walmart, and whatever you want. Pick your scenario, right? Okay, but guess what? That's neither here nor there. I'm having this conversation with you, and I just told you about the claims of Christ. You're accountable. Ooh, see, that brings it home, doesn't it? Right. But again, instead of doing that and sticking to the Bible, what do? They flip it around and say, oh, yeah, that would be horrible. That's why we baptize dead people. Okay, that's really what they teach, okay? So, and again, I wanted to clarify that. Okay, but let's go on further. Do they really baptize the dead? Yes, they do. And this is actually CNN.com. This is in their religious editor section. So, and this is relatively current. So this is really out there. This is what they're promoting. This is what they're advertising. This is what they believe, and they do. And I quote, oh, by the way, they're getting in trouble because they're baptizing dead people behind people's backs. Don't be baptizing my family. Woo, woo. I mean, it doesn't mean anything anyway because you're dead. When a person's dead, you're dead. You're in heaven or hell. But whatever. It's just people are starting to get a little bit upset because they're out there snagging anybody. Sure makes the numbers go up, doesn't it? But let's move on. The recent disclosure that Mormons baptized the dead parents of Jews.
Hello? Okay. All right. We've been reading. This is going to be, I'm going to read one last time, and then we will, oh, okay, I got to read. Give me a second. I do have to read. I think it's done. I have other things to read. And I'm on number 4. I'm gonna run out of videos. So I have to get this all done. Let me think, am I too tired to read anymore today? I feel like I'm too tired. So let's just finish this. Yeah, I've done 20 pages, so I've done good. Let's just finish this.
Jewish Nazi hunter Simon Wiesenthal by proxy has sparked an outrage in the Jewish world. The LDS Church vowed to stop baptizing Jewish Holocaust victims in 1995. They said they wouldn't do it no more. This is a secular piece. But proxy baptism for the dead is a proud Mormon tradition. And here's the basics of how it works and why Mormons do it. For Mormons, baptizing the dead solves a big theological problem. How do billions of people who never had the opportunity to accept Christ? Well, right here, Romans 1 and 2. No, they don't do that. Quote, by baptizing the dead, Mormons believe they are giving every person who ever lived the chance at everlasting life. What? Oh, including Muslims, Hindus, atheists, pagans, whoever. It's wild. Mormons believe that there's a place the dead go, which is called spirit prison, and where they will have a chance to accept this baptism. And this is from Richard Bushman. He's a Mormon scholar, by the way. He said, it's a duty to actually perform ordinance of baptism. So Mormons seek out, listen, quote, every last person who ever lived and baptize them. Why are they so big on genealogy? Why do they store these things in the side of a mountain? Why are these guys always, because of this? I thought they were just doing it to help us find our family history. No, they want to baptize your family, the dead. This is what it's really all about. All right. Many Mormons are proud of the fact that they attempt to make their faith universal. Anybody gets saved. Doesn't matter what you do. If you blew it, hey, we'll still catch you on the other side. Isn't this wild? Okay. And listen to what they say about us. Their way's so much better. Listen. They say, and I quote, and this is a guy named Terrell Gibbons, Mormon dude, expert on whatever. Historically, Christians have been exclusive. You know, we would say Jesus is the only way. John 14:6. I didn't make it up. He said it. He's the way, the truth, the life. Nobody comes to the Father except through him. And you better get saved in this life because you don't have another second chance. There is no second chance. Right? What's Hebrews 9:27 say? It is appointed man to die once, then face judgment. You don't keep coming back. And we dealt with the whole life, reincarnation, all that stuff in the Hinduism, Buddhism studies. Anyway, so historically, Christians have been exclusive. Evangelicals say only if you confess according to their traditions. The Mormons say, no, salvation is open to all people, dead or alive. Absolutely. Wow. The Mormons also encourage its members to baptize the dead in their families, going back at least 4 generations. Again, that's why they need to do it, because they got to do this. Because, you know, just like with Alvin, don't you want your family to be there? Right? It's that whole crazy thing, okay? The church also teams up with other people. They travel around the world to identify as many people as possible, baptize, listen, whether or not they're even in the lineage of present-day Mormons. Just grab them anyway. The Mormons are constantly going through parish records, wills, deeds, and other genealogical sources so they can extract names and put these people through the temple process. Wow. That's weird, with all due respect. There's no way for a person, listen, a secular article, CNN, listen to this quote. There's no way for a person to prevent himself or herself from being baptized by the LDS Church after death. Makes me think about, you know, the word Mormon. Remember what it was? This was basically the name for the boogie monster. They're going to come get you after the grave. God, they're going to baptize you. Can you believe this? Baptism for the dead inside the Mormon temples, that's where it takes place, which again, the average Joe, you can't go in there. But this is one of the many things that goes on in this secret temple, right? Stuff. Members of the LDS Church undergo full immersion baptism while the names, listen, while the names of the dead are raised, right? In fact, listen, apparently they're very efficient at it. The LDS member might participate in 10 or so baptisms at a time, right? It's kind of like Congress. You know, Congress wants to ram something through. They do what's called piggybacking. And they cram a bunch of bills on and and that's where you get into trouble. So if these guys, they don't do even one person at a time. It's like, okay, you're going down, ready? Bob Smith, Earl Smith, Bobby, hey, you got 10. Woo! Wow, crank them out. All right? And that's what they do. But anyway, so Joseph Smith, obviously, he's the one who introduced the baptism of the dead. And here it is. Well, you can laugh all you want, Sunrise, because this is biblical. Really? And here's what they do. Just like they ripped off completely out of context James 1:5, which is the whole premise of why they test the Book of Mormon. I know it's true because I ate a bad piece of chicken. I got to burn it in my bosom. No, you don't determine truth by that. But the same thing, they rip off, turn your Bibles to 1 Corinthians 15. Okay, we're going to take a look at that text real quick. 1 Corinthians 15, and the phrase there they rip out of context completely is, why are they then baptized for the dead? Well, see, it says right there they're baptized for the dead, so that's why we do it. No, that's not at all what Paul is talking about there. And let's explain that real quick. 1 Corinthians chapter 15. Of course, 1 Corinthians chapter 15 is what? It's called the resurrection chapter. It's all about the resurrection. And how many guys, when you read through 1 and 2 Corinthians, you realize that, man, they were so spiritual. Paul had hardly anything to say. These guys were doing everything right. No, they were messed up. Corinthian church was messed up. And Paul's addressing sin after sin after sin, and misconception and bad behavior, this. And then he gets into this, the resurrection, and he's basically shaming them. It's like, are you guys crazy? I mean, he's in the 15th chapter just in the first letter. He's already covered 14 chapters, for those of you hooked on math. He's covered 14 chapters of stuff, of things they're doing wrong, and he's having to correct it. And now he comes even to the resurrection. Are you serious? You guys are even thinking about doubting the resurrection? That's the whole context of what's going on here. And he calls him on the carpet on that there. Okay, but let's take a look there at 1 Corinthians 15. Let's start with verse 12. And you can hear, if you will, his sarcasm, if you will. He's trying to, like, what? You guys are blowing me away. I can't believe this, man. He says, but listen, if it's preached, verse 12, that Christ has been raised from the dead, how can some of you say there's no resurrection of the dead? Hello, McFly, you can insert that one in there, right? If there's no resurrection of the dead, then not even Christ has been raised. And hello, if Christ has not been raised, what? Our preaching is useless, and so is our faith. Everything hinges on the resurrection. How can you doubt this? This is the basic core issue of Christianity. Come on, guys. You blew it over here. You blew it on division. You blew it on sexual immorality. You blew it. And come on. Now the resurrection. I can't believe I'm covering this, right? You can almost feel that angst there with Paul. And then he goes on and he says this, well, more than that, we are found to be false witnesses. In other words, we're going around saying this. So now you're saying we're liars, right? False witness about God. For we've testified about God that he raised Christ from the dead, but he did not raise him. If in fact the dead are not raised, right? For if the dead are not raised, then again he says Christ has not been raised either. And if Christ has not been raised, what? Your faith is futile and what? You're still in your sins. You're not saved. This whole thing's a pipe dream. You're still headed to hell. It's a serious issue. Then those who have fallen asleep or died in Christ are what? They're lost. If only for this life we have hope in Christ, we are to be pitied all more than men. And then jump down to 29, because this is still the flavor of the context, right? They're doubting the resurrection. Paul, I can't believe you guys. This is the core of Christianity. How could you doubt this? If Christ wasn't raised, then we are still stuck in our sins. The people who've already died, they're not going to have a resurrected body. How can you doubt this? Verse 29, now if there is no resurrection, what will, listen, us? No, those. Key word. Now he's talking about a different group of people. Right? What will those do who are baptized for the dead? If the dead are not raised at all, then why are people baptized for what? Them, not us. Right? And again, Paul's just using another argument. I can't believe you guys are doubting the resurrection. Because if the resurrection didn't happen, man, everything we believe is just, we have no hope. We have no hope beyond the grave. Okay? Now, what's interesting when you look at Corinth, and again, they weren't like a prime example, unfortunately. And Paul's already having to correct them. And Corinth was influenced by the culture, okay, of the day, whether it came to their belief, their patterns, and all that stuff. Well, guess what? Guess what was around Corinth? There was just north of Corinth was a city named Eleusis, and that was a location of a pagan religion where baptism in the sea was practiced to guarantee a good afterlife, okay? And they also had, of course, the baptism for the dead that was practiced. And so all Paul is saying here, now he's trying to convince them in a multitude of different ways. Have you noticed that what's pastors, they do that? Have you noticed that? It's like, dude, you could have said that in 5 minutes. You took 45. What are you doing? Right? But see, you can't just say it once, Tom, right? You know the disease, right? You got to sit there, and if you don't get this, then I'm going to come around from this angle. I'm going to say it from over here. And if you don't get that, then I'm going to come around this third angle here. Oh, you still don't get it? I'm going to come around here on the fourth. Here's the fifth angle. You got it yet? And so Paul's already saying, listen, the whole thing on the resurrection, hey, listen, we're stuck in our sins. Really? Letting it? Oh, people are even raised. The people who've already, your Christian brothers and sisters in Christ who've already died, well, they're doomed too. Oh, by the way, you want to keep going? Okay, I'll tell you what. See, the Eleusinians, you guys know the Eleusinians over here, right? They baptize for the dead, right? Then if there is no resurrection, even they know there's a resurrection. Then why are they even doing that? And he's saying it to shame them. Even the non-Christians, the pagans know there's a resurrection. And here you are, Christians, and you're denying it. He's not condoning that behavior. He's just drawing a distinction. Even non-Christians know there's a resurrection. That's all he's saying. He's not saying do it, right? And the guy says this. He says, listen, if the dead are not raised, okay, if you deny the resurrection, then why are they, again, baptized for the dead? He's talking about the Eleusinians. He's not talking about the church, okay? He did not say we. Okay, he's not promoting the practice of baptism of the dead. The pagans were doing that. He used that as an illustration to shame them. Give me a break. Even non-Christians know that there is a baptism. Paul's point was simple. The resurrection is reality. It's going to happen when Jesus returns. Even the pagans believe in the resurrections. Otherwise, why would even they baptize? Okay, why did they baptize for the dead? Right? And again, let me give you an analogy. If I were to say, hey, even non-Christians know that eating chicken is bad for you. Well, Pastor Bill said it right there. Eat chicken. I didn't say eat chicken. I said, listen, everybody knows it's not good for you. Even the non-Christian knows. They can read the articles just like me. 70% of chicken contain arsenic. See, you think I'm joking? Read that article. But it's available right here. But I was like, no, I'm using that to basically make the point. Listen, you won't listen to me, but listen, even non-Christians know it's true. But I'm not condoning the activity. It's the same thing. Paul's saying, listen, even the non-Christian, these guys over here, you know them. They're right just north of you. Even the non-Christians, they do this practice, the baptism of the dead thing. Even they know the resurrection. But he's not condoning it. Do you see what they did? And so once again, just like with James 5, what do? They wrenched it out of context and said, well, it says right there, baptized from the dead. But again, it's not even to the church. It doesn't say we. He's two different arguments, two different audiences. They, those, and them. Okay, is the context there. So the whole thing is not even dealing with that. But then I'm going to throw this in there because you might hear this if you confront this with a person involved with Mormons. Let's say, well, that's all nice that you say that there's two different audiences there. That it's they baptized for the dead, meaning a distinction of a different group of people, not the Corinthian church. But technically in the Greek, the word they doesn't appear there. Well, yeah, technically, guess what? It's not. but then technically it is, because it's a verb that's translated there, okay, baptizentai, and it's in the third person plural. So when it's translated correctly, do you just say baptize? No, it's third person plural. So correctly so, the word third person plural, they, is added to it. So nice try. Have a nice day. It is correct with that word there. And I just had to throw it in there because unfortunately, sometimes they'll do that. So that's their practice with baptism of the dead. Now, flip the next page. Oh, it's right, Bobby. Because we're going to basically take a look at Mormonism in a nutshell. And if we're going to be able to do Mormonism in a nutshell, we ain't got time to do it tonight. So that's where we're going to start with next week, right? Taking a look at Mormonism in a nutshell. Because as we go through that, man, we're going to be dealing with all kinds of stuff. Because this is basically trying, remember the cartoon we saw? Okay, of what they really believe, that's what this is in written form. So we're going to tear this baby apart, and I'm probably going to have to stop because there's so much falsehood in it, and we're just going to rip it. But we'll do that, Lord willing, next time. Let's pray.
Well, hi, this is Pastor Billy Crone of Sunrise Baptist Church and Get a Life Ministries, and I hope you enjoy.
Hello? Okay. All right, guys. That was it for today. I got some other stuff I gotta get done. Maybe what time? It's early. I might come on for another one because I don't have to go to work until 5. I just need a break. I might come on again to do another reading in another video. Thank you for coming and watching. Bye.